You need a doctor?
I am a doctor.
I'm glad to be reminded as I review the movies I've seen this year that I was able to avoid watching a lot of truly terrible movies. And when I read articles listing the worst movies of 2022, one movie consistently appears on the list. Sadly, it's also among the movies I've seen this year. That movie is undoubtedly Morbius. There's something quite exquisite about the legends that managed to troll a film studio into re-releasing Morbius. After its first disastrous financial outing, only for it to bomb a second time, is evidence that the studio system as we currently know it is completely broken. Furthermore, when will Jared Leto stop acting altogether and devote himself entirely to that beach cult? Anyway, let's get the plot out of the way, or whatever the story is supposed to be, and then we can really dive into this mess. Jared Leto plays Michael Morbius, a Nobel Prize-winning biochemist who resides in Manhattan and who also acts as the CEO of the production firm. The illness is presumably so uncommon that it doesn't even have a made-up name, so I have no idea what's going on. He ventures out onto the ocean and conducts a dangerous experiment on himself, replacing some of his DNA with that of a vampire bat in an effort to survive. He thus changes into a scary pseudo-vampire who is forced to consume human blood numerous times every day. Dr. Morbius suffers from guilt over his illness, which is made worse by the fact that his surrogate and or legally adopted brother, who also has the illness, steals his therapy. Where to begin with this mess? How about with Jared Leto's casting? He isn't a horrible actor in my opinion, but he doesn't seem to know how to have fun when performing. Leto continuously projects a melancholy aura, even in parts that are supposed to be dynamic or exhilarating. Despite the fact that his Dr. Morbius isn't exactly meant to be the life of the party, he lacks charisma in that part. Although Leto is physically attractive and he has amazing cheekbones, the persona of Morbius is nevertheless made monotonous by the lack of vitality and life in his eyes. A man with vampire-like abilities is uninteresting? How can this character be made out to be boring? It's perplexing, but Leto's performance is generally dull, as shown by his on-screen presence. The former Doctor Who actor Matt Smith's portrayal, while not particularly strong, does highlight this point. While I will admit that some of his over-the-top theatrics in Smith's performance are a little embarrassing, and the costume designers did him no favours by dressing him as an evil version of his Doctor Who, Smith is at least animated and engaged, in contrast to Leto, who seems like he could use a few Red Bulls and an enema to get things going. If the acting is no good, what about the edit? Well, Morbius has to be one of the most disjointed theatrical edits I've ever seen. You see this all the time at the screenplay level, where different versions of a script are built on top of each other, and it sometimes works out fine, but this looks like it happened at the production level. It appears to have been pieced together from footage of several different drafts of the movie. Morbius's many scenes seem to have been created for utterly distinct versions of a film at various points, combined, and nobody seems to have gone through the trouble to smooth everything out. This seems more like a preliminary cut, with examples of many ways for a producer to consider than a finished film. The film is rife with changes in filming technique, tone and quality, as well as a superficial continuity inconsistencies and omissions of critical scene-to-scene material. For example, the film cuts away from Morbius just as he's about to receive his Nobel Prize for creating synthetic blood, and later reveals in dialogue that he travelled all the way to Stockholm and dressed up just to decline it because it wasn't enough to treat his own condition, or perhaps because he was a problem with the Swedish monarchy. These are all telltale signs of a post-production reworking. They built a complete set of the Stockholm concert hall and filled it with extras, got Leto and Gerard Harris dressed up in makeup, and then cut away from the scene before Morbius gets up from his chair to set the setting for him receiving the prize. Early previews revealed that Leto stood up to deliver a speech on the set. The sequence could have been finished, but it was omitted. The movie switches from close-ups of the main characters to a huge wide shot of Smith's character walking with his back turned while ADR dialogue walks the conversation from beginning to end in another early scene where Morbius refuses to give Smith's character his serum, which should have been an intimate and heartbreaking scene as Smith's character's selfishness and lust for power reveals itself from beneath his fear of death. The narrative point of this scene, the emotional development of his crucial character has been cut out, and the ragged ends have been stuck together with a voiceover that is so long that it barely fits the shot. Off-screen, he acts against Morbius's will and turns into a vampire. These scenes themselves are still there in both of these cases, but the narrative and emotional underpinnings that gave rise to them have been cut out, making them feel empty, like a sandwich with 2 slices of bread and some mustard that is mostly scraped off. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. I know I've dwelled on these scenes way longer than it deserves, but I'm just left gobsmacked at the amateurism of filmmaking at play here, and these are just a couple of the countless scenes that play out this way. So what happened here? Well, despite being scheduled for release on July 10th, 2020, the film underwent reshoots that February, right before the pandemic halted filming. However, for some reason, it underwent additional reshoots in February 2021. This movie, which ought to have already been finished, underwent a third revision without even having been released or received any reports of subpar test screenings. The idea behind this film's release appears to have been to present it as a work in progress, an event film without a final product to base it on, and the realisation of Sony's ambition of ticket sales without the need for a finished product. The obvious question is, when was Morbius going to be finished? And it appears that the answer is never, as it was still being revised after its initial release date and is obviously still unfinished even by its sixth release date. And let's be honest, this isn't Sony's first rodeo at making such an unfinished disaster before. I could go on about all the things wrong with this movie, but I think you get the point. In its 104-minute running duration, there is a lot of nothingness, and this is obvious because nothing good comes to mind even after seeing it for a second time, and I need an MBE for that sort of commitment. In the movie, things seem to happen in a vacuum, and then instantly fade from recollection. There's little suspense or tension, events happen and are swiftly forgotten. Nothing has any notable or significant effects. The most confusing part of all this is the conclusion. It's unclear how or why Morbius is related to the Vulture, a villain played by Michael Keaton and shown in 2 post-credit scenes. But the less we talk about the after-credit scenes, the better. Who even cares at this point? And don't be fooled by the people who tell you it's an enjoyable disaster like The Room.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
It's most definitely not. So I'll leave you with some final thoughts. Is Morbius a hero? Don't know. Has he started to turn bad? I don't think so. Why is he even evolving into a villain, given that Morbius only kills a few bad thugs in the beginning and doesn't do anything else really evil? What could be the reason behind it? Your guess is as good as mine. In actuality, he bravely battles Milo's murderous spree while searching for a way to prevent becoming into a murderer himself. I'd also like to add, on this rare occasion, Rotten Tomatoes and myself agree on a score. Well, if anything, it might be a little too high. After all that, I'm still intrigued to hear if this movie has its fans. And of course, I want to hear from those who see this as a stain on cinema like myself. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe for more British rambles in the future.